No, I got it. Hello, everyone. Please let me welcome you to our World AIDS Day event. So if you want to come up and take a seat after you grab some food, please feel free. My name is Abby, and I am an undergraduate student here at the University of Iowa. I am the Vice President of ICRED. ICRED is the University of Iowa's HIV/AIDS advocacy group. We are dedicated to raising awareness, educating, and decreasing the stigma on campus and in Iowa City. We have partnered with a lot of different great organizations to host this event. I want to give a thank you to Pitch, Positive Iowans Taking Charge, SNAFA, the Student National Pharmaceutical Association, Johnson County Public Health, who will be providing testing in the room directly across the hall, and Teleprep, who is providing prep consultations at the table back there. I would like to give a special thank you to the AIDS Healthcare Foundation for their generous support of tonight's event. Without them, this event would not have been possible. I would also like to thank the University of Iowa Patient Fund. To start off tonight, we'll be hearing from Marianne Williamson, one of our 2020 presidential candidates. Please give me a round of applause to welcome Marianne to this event.
Thank you. People all over the world today are commemorating. For a lot of us, there are a lot of memories involved. For others of us, the experience of AIDS, the topic of AIDS, has more to do with what's happening now. And for all of us, the topic has to do with our dedication to people who are living with the disease and how we are going to make sure that the scourge is over in the future. I myself am someone who keeps in my heart a lot of stories, and so I'm going to share with you my experience of the epidemic and what it meant in the life of this one person. I was a 30-year-old woman, and I was moving from Houston to Los Angeles. And for whatever reason, I actually remember a phone call. And I don't remember who it came from. I don't think it was a close friend, but it was someone who was living in Los Angeles. And they were telling me about, I don't remember if it was their cousin, their friend, their brother, I don't remember what it was. But this person had a pneumonia type of problem, and they were in the hospital, and they were going to die. And I said, but wait, don't they, I mean, pneumonia, don't they have medicine and stuff? And she said, no, there's this disease, and people are getting it, and they think it's maybe because he's gay, and they don't have any medicine, and he's going to die. It seemed so strange. I'd never heard, what was she talking about? But within months, this is all anybody was hearing about, that there was this disease and that they didn't have any medicine for it. And it was really terrible. And that if you got it, you were going to die. And mainly it had to do, people were saying, with gay men. That's all anybody knew. I went to Los Angeles and I started lecturing. And I was giving lectures on a set of books called A Course in Miracles. And the Course is not a religion, there's no dogma, there's no doctrine, but it's about the spiritual themes at the heart of all the great religious teachings. It's about love, it's about living with greater love for each other, it's about forgiveness, it's about compassion and how we're on the earth to love each other. Very soon after I started giving these lectures, something began to happen. And that is because I had moved to Los Angeles, and Los Angeles had an explosion of the epidemic. And not only that, but because the Hollywood community, the entertainment industry is centered there, and so much of the talent in the entertainment industry was comprised of gay men, there was just, you hardly met anyone who wasn't on some level, either somebody was infected, or somebody who knew somebody was infected, or somebody had a boyfriend, or somebody had a son. It became ubiquitous. And I was simply this woman talking about a God who loves us no matter what, and talking about love. Now, at first, when the disease became such an epidemic of such vast proportions, Western medicine kept trying. It wasn't like you got a sense they weren't even trying. You got a sense they were trying. But you also were aware that they kept playing cards and all of them came up with nothing. And so, for the most part, if someone found out they were HIV positive, their expectation was that they were going to die. Now, I know that this is, you can know this, but this is how far we have come. There were many men who I knew at that time for whom calling to tell their parents that they were gay was as difficult as calling to tell their parents that they were dying. That it was as big a struggle that I not only have to tell my parents that both things, and that both of them were horrors. And yet, even though there was Western medicine not at first able to come up with anything, and even though for quite a while the organized religions were oddly silent, having to move through whatever ambivalence or whatever, I don't know what that was. There was just silence for a lot longer than there should have been silence, I believed. For me, because I was this young woman, the same age as so many of these guys, talking about a God that loves you no matter what. You know, we had people at that time saying this was God's punishment, right? So here was somebody young at that time who had been partying just like they had been partying in the same ways that they'd been partying, talking about a God who loves us no matter what, and how our only task is to love each other, and if we love each other, we will get through this. And so that is how my work in Los Angeles began. And we were together all the time. Every day was a support group. Every day was a prayer group. Every day was a funeral. Every day was visiting someone in the hospital. And my own sister was dying of cancer. And I had this idea because all these people were coming to my lectures, and we were talking about being more loving. And all of these, particularly gay men, it wasn't just gay men, there were women and there were straight people as well, but it was primarily in Los Angeles at that time, this population of gay men. And I had this idea of a place where we could go because we were all together. We were all together at support groups, we were all together at hospitals, we were all together at funerals. And I thought we needed a place where people could go. And there's a billionaire in Los Angeles, a gay billionaire, named David Geffen. And I didn't know much, but one day I had given my lecture on a Saturday morning, and my phone rang, and it was David Geffen. I always joke that's one thing about rich people, they always know how to find your phone number. He said, "This is David Geffen, and I was at your lecture this morning, and I heard you say you want to start a house. You want to start something kind of center where people with HIV could come?" He said, what is this that you want? I said, well, I think we could rent a house, and then people wouldn't have to be home alone. You know, people could come over, and they could have food, and we could watch movies together, and people could get massages, because there were people who thought you couldn't even touch gay people who had HIV. There was so much fear. I said, we'll give Reiki, and we'll watch movies together, and we'll eat, and people just won't have to be home alone. Now, this is where I was in my head. And I mean, I knew he was David Geffen, but I didn't know anything in those days. So he said to me, well, how much money do you think you need to start this? And I said, I think I need $5,000. And he said, oh, really, $5,000? What did you spend the $5,000 for? And I explained to him very patiently. I said, well, see, if you rent a house, you have to have the first and the last month's rent. He said, oh, really, you need the last month's rent as well as the first month's rent? I said, yeah. He said, but what are you going to do about staffing? What are you going to do about everything else? I said, oh, well, we'll volunteer. There are enough of us who want to do it. And he said, but you think you could do it for $5,000, huh? And I said, yeah. And I told him what I wanted it to be. And then about 2 hours later, my doorbell rang, and it was a messenger with a check from David Geffen for $50,000. So that was in about 1986, 1987. And we started this house, and it was called the LA Center for Living. And then we also started one in New York called the Manhattan Center for Living. People started one in San Francisco, and there were efforts everywhere, in every state. There were people who would gather, organizations like that. And then what happened, in my experience, was when we started the house, We had a big fundraiser in Los Angeles. Like I said, my sister was dying at the time, so for me, in my mind, it was really non-medical services for people who were dealing with life-threatening illnesses. But when I saw who came and who made the party so beautiful, and there would be young men in tuxedos and covered with sarcoses, and one of the biggest memories from that time was how many these guys would show up knowing that this was like the final stages of their lives, and they would get all dressed up. It had to be glamorous and it had to be beautiful for these fundraisers. And when I saw who was showing up to make the party happen, I knew, wow, it is mainly about AIDS. And then the next phase of what happened was, I remember going into the house one day and saying, "Where's John?" And they said, well, John's not here. I said, well, why isn't he here? Because he usually comes during the day. And they said, well, he couldn't come out of the house today because he was too sick. And I said, well, if he's in the house and he can't come here, how's he going to eat? And people said, well, I don't know, because we were cooking at the house. It was a house on Sierra Bonita Street in West Hollywood. And I said, well, how's he going to eat? And then people said, well, I don't know. I said, we'll have to take him food. And then we realized that we needed to have a Meals on Wheels type program to deliver to people, and we called that Project Angel Food. And Project Angel Food, as of today, has served 12 million meals. What happened was that the Hollywood community totally opened its arms. And we had, at the first fundraiser for Project Angel Food, David Hockney, there was a David Hockney painting that one was being auctioned off, drinks with Liza Minnelli, Elizabeth Taylor would be there hosting, Bette Midler. Hollywood showed up in the most profound and beautiful way. And I remember that first night, and this was in 1990, we started the Center for Living in like 86, 87, I don't remember, but 1990 with Project Angel Food, and at that first fundraiser raised $1 million, which at that time particularly was so amazing. And then the next morning I gave birth to my daughter. That was also a time when, so much has changed. Many gay men now are adopting, and gay men, gay women, whatever, adopting now children, but at that time, it was not such an easy thing to do. And so there was a real sense in my life and with everything that was happening, we're having a baby, we're having a baby. Lots of people were running around saying, we're having a baby. And my daughter has 5 gay godfathers. So a lot of people talk about how terrible that time was. And it was terrible. But it was also, there was so much love. There was so much love. And that was true in Los Angeles, it was true in New York, it was true all over this country. I'm sure it was true here. And everybody has the stories that are terrible, but also many of us have the stories about how we all held on to one another. And I remember there was a long time before there was any medicine. They just didn't have anything. But we knew that we could love each other through this. And I remember the thing I kept saying was, well, there's no cure for cancer, but people live for a long time with cancer. And there's no cure for diabetes, but people live for a long time with diabetes. It can become a chronic manageable condition. That was what the prayer was. It can become a chronic manageable condition. And it has become, in the lives of many, many people, including some of the people who've introduced themselves to me today, a chronic manageable condition. And that is a miracle. I would just like to end with the story of one person that there were so many, the parents. I remember one woman, and I don't remember her name. Her son was her only child. But there was one man particularly. There was a young guy, and I'm sorry. This happens to me, every time they trot me out, I feel like I'm the grandmother they bring out from the attic once a year to talk about this at one of the events for Project Angel Food, and it's always like, oh, is she gonna cry again? But it's I think, for anybody who was there. But there was one young man named Merle, and Merle was very slightly built. And Merle he was a volunteer at my lectures, and he would carry in boxes of books. and Merle got sick. And Merle's father was a big, stocky guy, looked like he'd probably been a football player or something like that. And Merle's father, I don't know the specifics, but I don't think he knew from gay people or gay culture. And he loved his son. And he would help Merle, because as Merle got sick and Merle couldn't carry the boxes, his father would come. And I was just watching, but I watched Merle's father processing what was happening. I can't emphasize enough how many of these kids didn't want to tell their parents they were gay. It was a different time, things have really improved in many, many ways. Like right now, you see so much support. My child is gay, I'm very supportive. In those days, it was so radical when a parent would say that. So I saw Merle's father come every week. He's looking at these lectures, he's seeing all these, clearly there were a lot of gay people, there was a lot of, gay whatever, a lot of conversation about AIDS, and I just watched this man processing his situation. You could just see it on his face. He was flummoxed. I didn't get that he was homophobic. I wasn't picking up that he was homophobic. I just picked up that this was a world that was just so foreign to him. But he loved his son so much. And the process that they went through on the day Merle died, that he was surrounded not only by his father, but by all of these gay friends who were there to comfort the father. And those were the kind of miracles that happened. People growing, people where there's love. So there was pain and there was sadness, but there was love like nothing I've ever seen. And everybody who experienced that was marked. And I feel proud and privileged to have been marked by that. And I'm glad that those horrible, horrible days are over. But I also know that I'm a better woman because I was there. And I saw how very, very sad life can be. But I also saw what love can do. So I'm glad to be with you on this day because those people deserve a day. They deserve a day to be remembered. Thank you.